Hello everybody and welcome back to another modelled writing video. This video will look at two task 1 questions. So task 1, you have 20 minutes to answer this and you have to do a minimum of 150 words in your answer. So we'll be looking today at how we plan these answers, then we'll do the write-up as if we're in the real exam. So this is great if you've booked your IELTS test, maybe that's coming up. Maybe you just want some more information on how to answer these types of questions that we're looking at today. So either way, this is great practice for you and hopefully this is helpful. Along the way, I'll be giving top tips of how to score the high band scores. So stay tuned and I think this will shed some light on task 1. Okay, so let's go into our first question of the day. We are looking at a line graph and there's no S here, so we know it's just one. Okay, line graphs are quite popular, definitely something to be familiar with and confident in, and nevertheless we approach them in the same way as we would approach any task 1. We group, we say an overview, and we paraphrase as well. So I'll talk you through each of those steps. But first, let's have a look at the question itself. The line graph shows oil use in different areas of the world from 2009 to 2030. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so first things first is we're being told how to answer this question. We want to select and report the main features, really important, and make comparisons where relevant. That's interesting. So we don't need to make comparisons between every part. We just want to pick the most important or particularly interesting aspects, and then we can compare between them. So that's how we answer the question. We'll look at the structure in a minute. Now let's just double check what we're going to be looking at. So this is about oil use in different areas of the world between these years. Okay, let's bring in the data. Here we go. Right. Oh, lots to look at. Very colourful. Okay, so oil use of major consumers. Now, the major consumers are these countries here, which each have their own line. So the US in green, China in light blue, Western Europe and Japan in red, and Middle East in purple. Right, so let's have a think then. We are, well, on the x-axis we have the years. So 2 years have been 2009 and 2015. They've already been. So we've got 2 years that are in the future, 2025 and 2030. So now I'm thinking about groups. I'm thinking, oh, maybe that would be a good grouping, these 2 years and then these 2 years. We have the millions of barrels per day on the side here from 0 to 10. Good to be aware of that. So, okay, initial thoughts then. Wow, the US is really standing out as a high user of oil throughout the entirety from 2009 into predicted years into 2030. They're still the highest. However, there is a decrease in 2030 for the US, China, not the Middle East, but also Western Europe and Japan. So most of the areas of the world are decreasing by 2030. Okay, so now we can think about our plan. And even though we only have 20 minutes, a plan is still essential to organise our ideas, stay focused, stay on track, which is all things that we want to do with both task 1 and task 2. But yes, we'll think about task 1 today. So we want 2 distinct groups, and we've already spoken about it. So we'll put 2009 and 2015 together. Then group 2 will be the future years of 2025 and 2030. So the overview, then we can talk about the US being the highest consumer of oil throughout, and there is a trend by 2030 of areas decreasing the use of oil. So we can mention a few different parts. I mean, the overview is a general statement. So you want to make a sweeping statement about 1 or 2 different aspects. So the US stands out for me initially, and then you can talk about, actually, there is a decrease. But we don't want it to be too long. We're not pulling data from the line graph in the overview. We're keeping it very broad, and we're setting ourselves up to dive into our 2 groups, and that's when we'll draw all the data together. Okay, then let's move on to our write-up. So this is where we'll put our answer. Of course, you'll have your notes there, your plan. So we have the question, and we've also got this nice image here of different synonyms you can use for words to do with decreasing, staying the same, and increasing and decreasing, like rocketing, surged. And then when you combine these with adverbs like rapidly, sharply, this makes for a really nice way to express ourselves, and we can report in a very succinct way what's happening. So you won't have this in the exam, unfortunately, but we have it here today to help us. All right then, so what is the first thing we need to do? You might be thinking, well, we need to paraphrase this sentence here. The line graph shows oil use in different areas of the world from 2009 to 2030. Okay, so we don't need to worry about paraphrasing every word because we don't want to lose the meaning. So we'll just paraphrase as much as we can. So we can say the line graph because that's what it is, a line graph. Maybe displays information. And we're checking our spelling throughout. Displays information about oil. We don't want to lose the meaning again. Oil, about the usage of oil in various regions around the globe from the years 2009 to 2030. Let's read it back. The line graph displays information about the usage of oil in various regions around the globe from the years 2009 to 2030. Okay, so we've had a good think about that. So we've paraphrased as much as we can. Now let's move on to the overview. So our sweeping statement, we want to talk about the US. The US is the highest consumer of oil throughout the years this includes future predictions for 2025 and 2030. Oh, let's start this with a nice phrase, like in general, actually. In general, the US is the highest consumer of oil throughout the years. This includes future predictions for 2025 and 2030. However, in 2030, there is a trend towards using less oil, or yes, okay, using less oil. And I know that that's not the same for the Middle East, but we're making sweeping statements here, so we don't always have to, they don't always have to follow this trend. We're just making broad claims, so that's okay. All right then, so we've got our paraphrase introduction, we've got our overview that says a sweeping statement about what we're looking at here. So now we can go into our first group, 2009 and 2015. So let's open this up with a nice sentence to show the examiner how we're grouping them together. The graph, or maybe something like information for years that have taken place. Information for years that have taken place. Maybe we can open this up with the US actually and tie that in to save on words. So the US is or was the highest or was significantly using more oil than any other region in the years that have been and gone. 2009 to 2009 2009 and 2015. Okay, let's think about this. So the US was significantly using more oil than any other region in the years that have been and gone, 2009 and 2015. So we're paying attention to just this part here, really. Okay, so let's talk about maybe Western Europe and Japan. They follow, or maybe we can put in a figure actually, 2009 and 2015. Well, it's relatively stable. Staying relatively stable throughout, or maybe stable through the 6 years at just under 10 million. And then we'll look at the y-axis, barrels per day. Okay, so we're addressing the US here. Let's think about maybe Western Europe and Japan. In 2009, Western Europe and Japan have 6 million. We can describe them in different, we can describe the difference. Barrels less than the US. And then we could put a bracket here 4 million. There we go. Okay, so we're describing those trends there. And then we could say which steadily decreases. We're using words from this nice graphic here, which steadily decreases. Through to 2015. Okay, so 2015, it's maybe just over 3. Which steadily decreases to in 2015 to just over 3 million. Okay, so we don't want to talk about everything, so maybe we could just mention that the Middle East and China start at a very similar point in 2009. The Middle East and China start have a notably, that's a nice way of saying interestingly, notably similar or similar figure. Just below 2 million. Okay, let's read this back and see how we're doing. The US was significantly using more oil than any other region in the years that had been and gone, 2009 and 2015, staying relatively stable through the 6 years at just under 10 million barrels per day. In 2009, Western Europe and Japan have 6 million barrels less than the US, 4 million, which steadily decreases maybe steadily decreases, and in 2015 had just over 3 million. The Middle East and China have a notably, we're making sure it's past tense, had a notably similar figure, just below 2 million. Okay, so then let's talk about the future years. As the years head into the future, let's talk about this drop from the US. The US takes a sharp fall in units, and in 2030, it will be future tense using just over 4 million barrels per day, similar to Western Europe. We're making comparisons now, and Japan in 2009. Okay, so we're opening this up. What else is happening? China is also decreasing by 2030. So is Western Europe and Japan. And the Middle East is increasing. So we could say by 2030, other regions are following this trend to drop the amount of oil being utilized. Oh, I'm spelling this correctly. Utilized. With including China and Western Europe again and Japan. Now we can do a bracket. How much is China by the end? By 2030. China is just over 3 million, maybe. just above 3 million. And how much is Western Europe? And just above, and just, and approximately, oh, and 2, just higher than 2 million respectively. Okay. Oh, I'm making sure we're spelling. Right, so then let's talk about the Middle East, which does not follow this trend. The Middle East, however, does not, and we're not using contractions. We're saying the whole word, the full words, like does not follow this pattern, and it will be actually will not, making sure, and will be increasing the usage, will be how much are they increasing? Maybe steadily, gradually. Let's do gradually. The usage to 3 million barrels per day. Okay, let's read this back and see how it sounds. As the years head into the future, the US takes a sharp fall. Let's put will take a sharp fall in units, and in 2030 it will be using just over 4 million barrels per day, similar to Western Europe and Japan in 2009. By 2030, other regions will be, so we're really checking this tense, will be following this trend to drop the amount of oil being utilised, including China and Western Europe and Japan, just above 3 million and just higher than 2 million respectively. The Middle East, however, will not follow this pattern and will be gradually increasing the usage to 3 million barrels per day. Okay, right, so we haven't mentioned 2025. Is there a way we can sneak that in? Maybe we could say through 2025 well, this is a bit tricky to include 2025. Let's have a look. So we've talked about 2030. US drops in 2015. There's a sharp well, as the years head into the future, the US will take a sharp fall in units. Or maybe the US will continue its sharp decline that began in 2015. Maybe let's put in 2025 here, and in 2025 it will be using just over what's the figure here? It will be using 7 million barrels per day. In that case, we can get rid of this sentence here. By 2030, other regions will be following a trend to drop the amount of oil being utilized, including China and Western Europe and Japan, just above 3 million and just higher than 2 million respectively. And we're just checking the units here. So China by 2030 was, yes, just above 3, and then Western Europe is just above 2. Okay. The Middle East, however, will not follow this pattern and will be gradually increasing the usage to 3 million barrels per day. Maybe we could be more specific per day by 2030. Let's just round that off quite nicely. Or in 2030. Just to be really clear what we're referring to here. Okay, so as you can see, we've gone back and we've altered some things, made it sound a bit smoother, checked spelling, checked that we've touched upon not everything, but a little bit of all kinds of areas. So now let's count the words. Okay, so this brings us to 221 words. So it is over the 150 minimum there, but that's okay. There's no upper limits. You can go for it as long as you're not picking on absolutely everything to talk about. You're still being selective. That's the main thing here. You can really just, if you're a quick writer or a typer, then that's absolutely fine. So you can see how we structured this answer, and you're going to follow this if you want to follow this structure. You can do it for every task 1, and that's what we'll be doing in the next task as well. So no matter what data we're presented with, we can follow this structure, and we're making sure that we're hitting all the points. Then we're answering the question, we are drawing upon numbers and statistics from the data itself, we're grouping, we're writing our overview, we're doing all the things that are expected of us. Okay then, so that was our first task 1 of the day. Now let's go into our next one. And we're going to look at multiple charts. Now, students sometimes don't like this type of question because it's intimidating. We don't know where to begin. We don't know how to group. It's a lot of information to process. So we'll talk through it today, and we'll see how we can tie in all the charts together, and it's not as daunting as it may seem. Okay, the question. The charts show the total usage proportions for water in Australia and a breakdown of its residential purposes. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So as always, we know what to do. We want to select and report the main features and also make comparisons where they are relevant. Okay then, so what are we actually looking at though? Let's have a look. Total usage proportions for water in Australia. Okay, so that might be one chart or display, and also, so this might be in a separate graph, a breakdown of its residential purposes. Right, okay, so those might be the 2 different things that we're looking at. Let's see what this could be. Ooh, okay, so we have a pie chart on the left, and we've also got a bar chart on the right. There we go. Let's have a look at this a bit more then. So this is our overview water consumption in Australia in 2004. This is like our umbrella, if you like. And then within that, we have the residential usage. So what's going on overall? We have, wow, residential houses in green. We've got our key here. That's really consuming most of the water. Actually, point to note here, we don't have the statistics for this one. That's okay. It's not an error, don't worry. Sometimes you might not have the numbers, so that's okay. We have to think of other ways of expressing the different sections here. So residential houses followed by residential apartments definitely take up the largest share of the water. They consume the most. small sections of sectors of society. Other, we don't know what that is. We're not going to question it. It's not our place to think about why, but we just state the information. So other and also government are on the smaller side of consumption there, really. Okay, so then heading into, let's take a zoom in lens, if you like, on the residential water. Now we do have percentages for this one, and we've got different areas of the house. So bathroom in general, toilets, washing clothes, kitchen, garden. Okay, so then I think what we could do for this one, you might think, oh, where to begin with grouping? Well, the logical way to group would be to sort of touch upon the residential houses and apartments being the largest share, and then we can talk about how this is distributed, amongst the houses and apartments. Then in the next group, we can focus on the other areas, which we don't obviously have data for, but we can talk a bit about them. So this will be the biggest paragraph about residential use, and then we'll touch upon the other areas in the second group. So with that in mind, then let's head to our groupings. We'll write down our notes. So we're going to focus on the residential side, and that will talk about the two, both the pie chart and the bar charts, the two diagrams here. And then we'll touch upon other groups in the second, or other categories. In the second group, so things like government, industry, business, and we'll find creative ways of describing that information there. So the overview then, well, residential really consumes the most water. So residential properties took the majority, the share of water in 2004. In particular, the green, which is the houses. So we can shed some light on that, in particular, houses. Okay then, so you can see how even though we have more than one diagram, or in this case we have a bar chart and a pie chart, we still approach it in the same way, and we still want to logically group them together. So not to worry too much. You can talk about, you might group, like in this case we're talking about both in the first main body, then in the second main body we probably won't touch upon the bar charts, we'll focus on other parts. So you can see how it's quite flexible. You can group different charts or graphs together for one paragraph, and perhaps you don't touch on them in the other one. So it really depends on the question here, but yeah, okay. Well, let's head into the write-up then, and just like every task one, we need to paraphrase the first sentence here. So the charts show, so let's be specific, the pie chart and bar graph display information on the usage proportions of water, maybe share of water. In Australia, we can't really find another word for that. That's okay. In Australia, as well as a further examination of, and we're checking spelling as we're going along, of its uses in a home setting, perhaps. Let's read this back. The pie chart and bar graph display information on the share of water in Australia, as well as a further examination of its uses in a home setting. So maybe we could be even more specific. We could say the pie chart displays information on the share, as well as a further examination by means of a bar chart of the water's uses. Let's do another comma here. As well as a further examination by means of a bar chart of the water's use in a home setting. Okay, so we've put it into our own words. We've been more specific, which is a good way of paraphrasing if you're not sure. If you can be more specific, that's good. Okay, I think that's a strong start. So what do we do now? We need to state our overview. On the whole, and we want to talk about how residential properties took the majority of the share. On the whole, residential properties, homes and apartments, held the majority of water in 2004. In particular, houses. Or maybe we could say residential properties were distributed the majority of water in 2004, in particular houses. Okay, so that is a broad overview for the whole data. So now let's dive into the residential uses itself, and so we'll be talking about the pie chart and also the focused, bit more focus on what that water is being used for within the house. Okay. So both apartments and houses, we stating from here, used nearly 3/4. So we can be a bit creative with how we feedback this information, because there's no statistics here, no figures. Used nearly 3/4 of the entirety of Australia's water in 2004. Okay, so we're referring to the pie chart. In which houses we want to talk about how houses had over, in which residential houses proportion was over half. Okay, so we've addressed that. Now we can dive into what that's being used for. A closer examination. It can be seen that this water was being directed to the bathroom and garden the most. Maybe we could talk about was being directed to the bathroom and garden the most. And we can do a nice bracket here. And so let's double check 25%. So we have a 5% gap here, 25, 26, maybe 27, 28. 28% and 25, 26, 27, maybe 27. 7% respectively. Okay. What's happening in the middle here? We've got toilet, washing clothes, kitchen. Okay, so we don't want to report about everything here. So we can just pick a couple. Let's see, let's combine toilets and washing clothes together. The figures are quite nice here, 20% and 15, 35%. And then we'll talk about the kitchen being 10. The toilets and washing clothes demanded 35% of the water. Washing clothes together demanded 35% of the water, whereas kitchen was the least consuming element of a house at 10%. Okay, let's read this back and see how this sounds. Both apartments and houses use nearly 3/4 of the entirety of Australia's water in 2004, in which residential houses proportion was over half. In which the residential houses proportion was over half. On closer examination, it can be seen that this water was being directed to the bathroom and garden the most, more than other areas, 28% and 27% respectively. The toilet and washing clothes together demanded 35% of the water, whereas kitchen was the least consuming element of a house at 10%. Okay, so we've not described absolutely everything that's going on. We've lumped some information together, which is a good way of mentioning it, but not being too specific. You can add, group two parts together, add up their percentage. You can use brackets. That's another good tool to not report on everything. Okay, so we've talked about a lot there. Now we can think about other industry, government, and business. So we might want to do a linking sentence. Outside of places where individuals and families live, the water was significantly less we've used utilized outside of places where individuals and families live, the water was significantly less needed. Well, industry looks like it's nearly as much as apartments, so we could talk about that. The industry sector, however, we could sort of make this distinction, however, required nearly as much water as residential apartments. We could touch upon how that's much less than houses. Required nearly as much water as residential apartments, which used strikingly less water than apartments, than houses. do the brackets there. Okay, let's see if this makes sense. The industry sector, however, required nearly as much water as residential apartments, which in turn use strikingly less water than houses. Okay, so we're doing a lot of comparisons here. Hopefully, we'll just make sure that makes sense. Now let's touch upon, we've got business or we've got government and other. Maybe we could not touch on business really. Actually, we could say after business, government and other categories were allocated the least amount or consumed, required, demanded, took the least or the lowest share of water. And together they probably barely make up industry's share. Together they consume less than industry. Okay, let's have a read and see how this sounds. Outside of places where individuals and families live, the water was significantly less needed. Maybe not needed, but significantly less wasted, required. Maybe required if we've not used that yet. We're always checking that we're not repeating ourselves. The industry sector, however, required nearly as much water as residential apartments, which in turn use strikingly less water than houses. As previously mentioned, maybe. After business, government and other categories took the lowest share of water. Together, they consume less than industry. Okay. These last two mentioned, to be more specific, consume less than industry. When put together, consume less than industry. Okay then, so we've just gone back and edited to make sure everything sounds okay. And we're looking for a minimum of 150 words. Okay, so this comes to 183 words, just over the 150 minimum there. But hopefully you can see how we can still group data and do our groups logically, even with multiple charts like we had today. It's absolutely fine to use one in one group, and if it's not needed in the other, that's fine as well. So you can still see how we follow the structure as always and are able to draw upon the main features, and we've also made comparisons, which is great. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for coming along, and let us know if you've got any questions. We really love to hear from you, and we'll see you next time.